Kum Lenin Ablak Gemara. We are up to Daf Pei Hey Amud Aleph Masech Kesuvos. So we were discussing here in the Mishnah. It talked about if there was only a certain amount of money left, and it didn't yet enter the domain of the Yershim. And you have a number of people who are staking their claim, including the Kesuva, lender, and so on and so forth. So Tarfon says that since the children didn't inherit it yet, because it's sitting out in a Shusarabim, according to one opinion, Rav Shmuel, according to Shorvich, and even in a Simton, a side street, the Yershim didn't get their hands on it, ownership yet. And since generally metaltlu are not encumbered for these debts, so if they grab a hold of it, the tfisa helps. Rabbi Akiva says, "Ein merachim in bedin." An interesting expression. There's no place for compassion when it comes to the law. Law is very cold and brutal. There's no place for compassion when it comes to the law, and therefore it belongs to the Yisaimim, and there's no place for tfisa. Okay, so and we had a number of stories with people paskin Rabbi Tarfon, and they were told, no, you have to follow Rabbi Akiva. There's no place for tfisa. According to Rabbi Akiva, the only time that grabbing helps is if you grabbed it while the father was still alive. Because then, he owed it to you, and therefore you grabbed, but you shouldn't have grabbed it. But if you did, it's a valid grabbing. So now we are up to the Gemara here. The last episode we had, Rav Papa and Rabbi Yeshua, and they were told off as well. That the Halach Rabbi Akiva had no right grabbing. Up to about 9 lines on top of the page, Avimai, right in the middle of the line. Avimai breyed Rabavu. Avimai, the son of Rabavu, Havimaske bezuze bechazoi. He lent money to people in Bechazoi, and he wanted it back. So what he did was, Shadrinu biyad chama breyed Rabavu. He owed money to somebody Bechazoi, so he sent the following shliach, Chama, the son of Rabba Baravu, and he sent him with money, Azol Parinu, and he told him, go ahead and pay off my loan. Now he didn't, we'll see in a minute exactly what are the instructions he gave him, because there's a contract, a star, a loan contract. And what actually happens to the loan contract is when you pay it off, you get it back and you rip it up. So what happened was he went and paid, and then he turned to the lender, and then this shliach turned to this lender to this lender, and he said, so Chama turned to the lender and said, "How will you start it? Give me back now the loan contract." They said to him, "Sitroi ninu, we're keeping the money you gave us for another loan, an outstanding loan that he owes us, and we have no contract for it. We're going to use the money for that because we'll never collect it. We're keeping the loan contract so we can still get collected." So now we have a whole question there. When he went to pay up the loan that had a contract against it, a loan contract, but now that he gave it to them, they're saying that no, there's another loan there. Also, Rabavu went to the entire for Rabavu. Amalei Isla said, Rabavu said to him, "Look, tell me, Isla Chasadi de Paratino, do you have witnesses that you paid it? Because if you have witnesses that paid it, and they have no evidence that there's another loan, they have to prove there's another outstanding loan. Otherwise, they have to give you back the loan contract. But if you have no witnesses, then they have a migri. If they were liars, they could have just said, he said, they could deny that you just said. They could say you never paid us. And since sometimes we say Heinen Eid of Heinen Shluchav. Sometimes we say the Eid himself can be the Shliach himself can be a witness. But in this, that once we made a rule that you have to make a Shavuos Hesses, that you have to swear with the Rabbanon regarding what happened. So then the Shliach can no longer be an Eid. So it's word against another word. You have no evidence that you ever gave him the money. So if they say we did receive the money, but it's to pay off another loan, they'll be believed. So we're in that pay hey Amud Aleph, about 12 lines on top of line. So therefore, since they have a migui, unfortunately, you have no case to answer. So they can say sitroinino. This is for something else. And from here, the Rishonim learn out that if you pay off a loan, the person who receives the money can decide which loan. Let's say you owe 3 loans. The person who receives the money can decide which loan you're paying off. Which invoice you're paying off. According to some Rishonim, even if you clearly spell out, I want this money to cover loan B, and the guy doesn't say anything, and he takes the money, he can then say, I'm using it for loan A. Loan B, I still want to get paid for. Loan A, I'm going to use it for loan A because maybe I have better evidence for loan B, and I'm not worried about loan B, or have more properties encumbered to it, or whatever it is. And the reason for that is he'll say the reason why I was quiet is because I was scared if I would protest, you wouldn't pay me, so I kept quiet. Anyway, if you want the money to go against a particular loan, you have to wait for the lender to not only be quiet but to actually agree, at least not as an agreement or something. Now the Gemara turns around and has an interesting question. Okay, so the shliach messed up. This chama messed up because he was given money to pay for a certain loan, and now the people took the money and claimed it for another loan. So the question is he responsible, the shliach, because he didn't really carry out his shlichus the way it's supposed to be? What's the regarding shliach? If he gave him instructions, collect the loan contract and then pay him. The havle is give him money, mishalim, then he has to pay. You didn't carry out the instructions because you gave the money first, so it's your fault. But if he said have zuzi v'shko started pay up and then collect the star, then mishalim, you did the right thing, and there's nothing you can do about it. However, they want to conclude, it's not correct. In both cases, he has to pay. Why? He says to him, I sent you to help me out, and not to ruin me. So even if I told you clearly, pay up and collect the shliach, I didn't necessarily mean in that order. I just meant this is your two missions that you have. One mission is to pay up and one mission to collect the star. You need to do the right way. You need to make sure you do it the correct way, which is collect the star first. And if you didn't, if you messed up, it's your fault. Okay, some more incidents. Very interesting here. There was a woman, there was a woman that they stored by him, continuing this idea that if you're grabbing before the Yoshin get the hands on it, is it a valid grabbing? Or confiscating, is a valid confiscation? This is called tfisa. Is it a good tfisa or not? So this woman was mining a story, buying a whole jug full of different kind of contracts, and she was mining it for somebody. That person then died. Also, Yoshim Katovale came along, Yoshim, and they wanted back all of these contracts so they can collect. There were debts there, or other things there, maybe deeds or property. They wanted to have all these contracts back. So, she said, your father owed me $100, and this is my security. I'll give it back to you when you give me $100. Not that she can use any of these contracts, because contracts are not kind of just by holding it. It has to be more than just holding it. It's Ksiva, Masira, you need another star for that. So therefore, it's not a question of her using this contract, it's her holding it purely as like ransom. You pay me back the loan, and then I'll give you. Otherwise, I have no means of getting the loan back. Also, the coming I'm not said to her, do you have any witness at all that father, you said you grabbed it, and you were not, and there was some point, the father definitely gave it to you for you to mine, and you say at some point I decided I'm no longer mining for him, I'm keeping it, I'm confiscating it. Do you have any witnesses that this happened? How do we see that? Do you have any witnesses that the man came over and said, give me back my contract, and you said no? In other words, now I'm confiscating it. Do you have? I'm like, no. If so, have it tfisa. So you decide after the father died, you're now going to keep confiscated. And we learned before that halacha of Rabbi Akiva that the moment the father dies, everything automatically goes to the children. The tfisa la'chamisha is nothing worth. Okay, again, we have a number of stories that to show that we pass like Rabbi Akiva. There's a very interesting few stories now. A woman came along, she had to swear in a bezin, whatever the case was, but the bezin ruled that she has to swear. And Rava was the head dayan, came along the daughter of Rav Chizda, who was Rava's wife, and said to him, whispered in his ear, Yadana, but I know that woman. The chashuda, I wouldn't trust her as far as you throw. She cannot be trusted. She'll swear you cannot trust her sure. She said that. There's no witnesses that came along and said that this woman is a ganef or anything like that. It's just purely his wife said to Rava. Afcha Rava l'shvu, he listened to his wife, and he said the rule is when the defendant cannot swear, we turn to the plaintiff and we say, you swear and you collect. So Rava took the shvu and turned it around, Asher Kenegda, on the plaintiff. In other words, he believed his wife implicitly. So Zimnin, another occasion, Haviyasha came at a Papa of Adam Master. That Papa of Adam Master was sitting and learning with him. Isa who started Gabe, they brought a star before Rava. The Papa said, you're dying to be the star of Pri. I know the star is fraudulent because I remember clearly, or I know for a fact that this star was paid up already and somehow or another ended up again back in the lender's hand, and he's reusing it. He's recycling it. You shouldn't listen to it. This is what Papa told Rava. Now, Papa was Rava's main student, a Papa of Huniblev from his main student, and a Papa is one of the prolific Amoraim in the Gemara. Look what Rava says. You're the only one. Is anybody else that you have another aegis with you to corroborate what you're saying? Because you want to take a shot that has two witnesses on it and you want to ruin it. You want to disqualify it. I'm the only person. So in that case, even though you're saying what you're saying, I can't rely on you. You're only a single witness. You want to disqualify a shot? I can't disqualify a shot based on one witness. About the master turned to her Rav and said, I don't understand. I was there when your wife told you, whispered to you that woman shouldn't be trusted with a shrew, and the Torah said you can trust a person with a shrew, and you believed her. And yet your own student, a Papa, tells you something, and you say, sorry, Papa, you're not credible. Below you hate a Papa kabas of chizda, shouldn't he be at least equal to her? So Rav, look at Rav's responses. Bas Rav chizda. I know him. She's the most credible person that I know, and therefore, if she tells me that someone's not to be trusted, I trust her. I don't know you. You're my student, but do I know your true personality? No. And this is actually people call up, all these teachers. You taught my daughter, you taught this boy. Tell me about a shit. What kind of guy is he? You see right here, a teacher doesn't really know the true personality to tell you how smart they are and how interested they are learning, but the personality, not really. As Rava says right here. Rava said, so what are you teaching us right now, Rava? That even though you have need to aid him, but if you really, really believe somebody, that's good enough. You don't need to aid him, you don't even need to aid like you believe your wife. So that believing somebody is actually acceptable. My son, Abba Mori, to me, the most honest person in the world. I trust him. If he tells me that a star is disqualified on his evidence, I would disqualify, even though he's my son, and he's not kosher aegis, you're being a relative to the dying. I trust him because I can trust him. You actually rip up the star with two aegis and everything. I would ruin the star, and in other words, we'll no longer collect the star. And the way Rashi seems to learn is it just sits there. But if somebody grabs based on the star, it's like we hand up chavbei, it's a good grabbing. Taisa learns that means that the star, he ruined the star, that the person wants to use the star and collect with the star, they have to now swear, even though generally you don't have to. The Rishonim say that this rule does not apply today because they say that do we really know who we can really trust? To that extent, equal to two Eidim and all that. Says the Gemara, there was a woman that had to swear in the Bezdin of Ibn Amalu Baldin. So the Baldin said, the plaintiff said, why don't you take her to swear the Masa in her city? Let's swear in her city, in the defendant's city, because maybe in her own city she'll be embarrassed because she knows people know the truth, and she will tell the truth. And they agreed, So the plaintiff is forcing the defendant to go to the defendant's city. Others have a different gift, so that the plaintiff actually is forcing the defendant to go to my city, and in my city, it's a big city, I guess, and she might be embarrassed. So she said to the people at the buyer, I'm ready to go. So before we go, I want you to write me a document that I'm ready to swear, whatever you want me to do. I want you to write me a document as if I swore already, and give it to me when I get there. When I swear, you'll give it to me. Ruled, okay, write it. We'll write it now, even though it didn't happen yet. And we won't give it to her until she actually action it. The puppy said, because the Asisi Mimuli, because he come from a broken up place, because they were Abayi was a descendant of Eli, that's why he died young. Rabba died 40, Abayi 60, because he had the schus of tzedakah, but he still died young. But because you're broken in life, you're also broken in thought. Amrita Mili Mulis, he said broken thoughts. How can you write a star in a bezdin before the event happened? even though you know it definitely happened. You won't pass it on to her, but it looks fraudulent. This, let's say, gespanke from a bezin, this certification of a bezin, the mitzvah mekamed never sadi. If you signed, if the bezin gave a stamp on a document before the witness actually signed, knowing the witness will eventually sign, and they gave, he said it's possible because it's a false document. You signed that already happened, but Moshe made close in front of 3 people. This is all done and documented and signed, and it wasn't, and therefore it's false. Alma Merzika is a concept called it looks fraudulent. It also looks fraudulent. How can you give her this document that she already swore? The lesson he must have not true. Because Rav Nachman said, if you found a document out in the tip, the chasman you signed it, and you gave it to her to get, and you gave it to her, kosher is kosher. I feel that Rabbanon only argued because they say it's lacking in being in. They say it's not enough that the Adam sign having in mind this particular woman, actually be written for this particular woman. You found a get out there, and the name of the get and the husband's name and the wife's name are identical to these people, so you're going to use it, even though the Adam are going to sign having this particular couple in mind, but the original get was not written for them, and that's why they disputed. Otherwise, they have no problem. What do you call it? The Amar Abasi said, if let's say a lender lent money, and it was paid off, then the borrower says, can you lend me another $100, the same $100 again? You cannot use the same document again. The problem is because the date is too early. Remember, the document enables you to go to the fields that were purchased and collect it from them to pay off the debt if the borrower has no money to pay. But you'll have the wrong date because that debt was taken care of. It should be a new date on it. That's the only reason. The only reason is the fact that it looks false, the fact is that this document was not written for this new loan. That doesn't disturb us. That doesn't bother us. This get was written not for this particular couple. That doesn't bother us. So when their Bibi Barabai agreed to write this document that she swore everything was all right, it's not a problem as long as when he gave it to her, she actually did swear. Okay, now we're going to have the same story repeated in different names 3 times. I'm not sure why we need it so many times. However, as a person, the Afkid Shev Marganisa that deposited 7 diamonds inside of a Sadina that was wrapped in a handkerchief, so nobody knew how many there were except the depositor. In the house of Rav Measha Bar Breda, the grandson of Shmuel Levi. What happened was, he just minded there's a favor, but Shachiv Rav Measha passed away, but like pocket, he didn't instruct his family about this. He didn't give them any instructions who it belongs to and so on. Also, so the Yisayim, they found it and they said, it's ours. Wow, they didn't know our father was rich. Also, when he went to Dintaid, because that person said, it's mine. I deposited with your father. It's the late father. So the dying said, first of all, the Yadayna are grounds to say that this person is telling the truth. Because the Yadayna we know, this Ramiyasha ben Levi, he wasn't wealthy. How in the world can he afford 7 diamonds? Number one. Second thing, this person gave a simon because how did he know there were 7 diamonds there? And he also gave us the hotel signs about the diamond, the shape, and the luster, and so on. So it must be that it's his. But when do we say that only this guy didn't frequent the house? It could be he once saw it, but if he never goes to the house, or the other one he deposited, then he's telling the truth. If he constantly goes there, the guy wasn't rich. Somebody deposited, but I know it's him. Maybe he just happened to see it being deposited. If he always comes to the house, he saw. So Torah Shem explain we need both of these reasons together to say it does not belong to the Simon. The fact that he isn't rich is not enough reason to say it belongs to that person. Maybe he won the lottery, maybe he found it. You need that plus the fact that this other guy gave some money. Together, we say that it belongs to that other person. Because the fact that the other guy gave some money is not good enough. Because maybe he bought it. Maybe Miyasha bought it. Okay, this guy originally owned it. This person bought it, and that's why the original guy knows about it because he sold it. So that doesn't prove yet. But if we know that the person is not rich, so he couldn't have bought it, and the other person has some money, and the 2 reasons together, then we will give it to them. Now I'm going to bring 2 other stories that were very similar. There was a person after Costa Kaspa that once stored a silver cup at the house of Chasser. Shochiv Chasa, he passed away with a pocket, and we learned the more Yivamas as Rashi brings over here that this person drowned, and he didn't instruct anybody. First of all, we know he's not rich. How in the world would he have a silver becher? But look, you have some money. The guy gave us simon exactly what it is. The only time we accept the simon is if this person doesn't frequent the house of chasam. But he does frequent it. It's quite possible somebody else deposited the cup. He just happened to notice it sitting around. Case number 3, same idea, same principle. Somebody stored metachsa, a silken garment which is expensive. Beirav Dimi in the house of Dimi, Achbar of Saf, the brother of Saf, Shocher Dimi died with a pocket. Dimi died, didn't instruct anybody. Also, the Kamil Baba and again, the same wanted to keep it. Amle, he said, Baba said, Chadu, you died of Dimi. First of all, we know Dimi wasn't rich. He gave a simon. But when does the simon count? Doesn't enter the house often. He goes often. It was another person who stored it, and he just happened to notice. Why we have 3 stories here, basically saying the exact same principle, the exact same outcome, I am not sure. A person on his deathbed, and it's important that he's on his deathbed, said, my estate is going to Tuvia. Shachi, they died. Now, we don't know which Tuvia it is. Also, Tuvia, a fellow came along whose name was Tuvia. Tuvia came. Let's give it to him. We have no reason not to give it to him. What happens? Omar Tuvia, he said Tuvia, but Va'asa Rav Tuvia, who came forward to collect Rav Tuvia. So we say Tuvia Omar, he called him by the name Tuvia. The Rav Tuvia Omar, if he would have thought, if he meant the Rabbi Tuvia, he would have called him Rabbi. Because he omitted the word Rabbi, he said Tuvia, that means this is not the person. But the Gispe, but if he's close to this rabbi or he's a friend of his, Gispe, then people generally become friends, even though the person might be a Talmud Chacham or a Rav, we call him by his first name. What happened to Osir Shnei Tuvia? 2 Tuvias came along. Shachem, one was a neighbor and one was a Talmud Chacham. So and we don't know which Tuvia it is. What do we think? Which Tuvia did he give it to? So we assume, you know what? Talmud Chacham Kaidim. Probably Talmud Chacham. Why is that? Because the person is dying. If a person wouldn't be dying, we wouldn't say that. We might even say that as Shachem. But because the person is dying, he wants to do some good deeds before he goes to meet his creator. So therefore, we're going to assume he probably gave it for the Talmud Chacham. And Rashi quotes Gemara in Brachas where it says that all the Nevi'im said prophecy regarding the wonderful thing about giving Hana to a Talmud Chacham. So rather than the Shachem, because he's dying. What about Kadov Talmud Chacham, a relative or Talmud Chacham? Both are called Tuvia. Which one do you think he meant? Talmud Chacham, Kadov. Talmud Chacham again. Iboilu Shachem, this is interesting. You have a relative and you have a neighbor. Who do you think that he would rather give the gift to, his neighbor or to his relative? Toshma coming here. Shlomo Melech says, Toiv Shachin Kadov Ma'ach Rachin. A person is better off with a close neighbor than a distant relative, or relative who lives far away. What about Shneim Kreim Shneim? They're both equal. They're both relatives, and they're both called Tuvia. Or they're both neighbors on both sides, and one is called Tuvia, the other one's called Tuvia. Shneim Chacham, and they're both Tamil Chamim. Now we're stuck. Which one did he mean? Shuda the Dainam. And here we have a big machlekes Rashi Taisus, and this is we have in Bobasev and so on. Shuda the Dainam literally means throw it to the Dayanim. Rashi says that Dayanim have to sit there and assess. So which person do you think that he was closer with between these 2 people in the past? And so therefore we can try to enter the mind of the deceased and who would say, so which person did he actually give it to? Taisa of any time disagrees. He says Shuda the Daina means the young can do whatever they want. Shuda the Daina, that they could do whatever they want. They just toss it in the air. They can take a coin and flip it, do whatever they want. They don't have to do any assessment. Now, there's a very interesting Taisa here. The very last line, I'll just quote you what Taisa says. The last line of Taisa Shuda Daina, Taisa has a question. So in this case, if it's, according to Rashi, makes an assessment, there's nothing that either party can do right now, because you're going to do your homework and you'll find out from other people. So who used to come to his house more often, who was he closer with, and so on. So who do you invite more times to the home? But Taisa says, according to Rabbeinu Tam, he just willy-nilly, they can choose whatever they want. On absolutely no basis. So what's going to happen is one of them will pay more money to the dayan than the other. And then when you pay money to the judge, one person will pay more, so the judge automatically or naturally is going to have choose that person. So the last line takes this Shleimer, very interesting. Chol dayan, any judge, the Mekabel Agar, he says, any judge who gets paid for sitting on a court case, on a din Torah, lav dainu, he's no longer a dayan. He's not qualified to be a dayan. Today, the only heter that the yonim have to collect money, actually we'll see a little bit later, next page, the only heter is schar batola. They can get paid for the time they could have been working somewhere, and whatever they would have got paid there, you should pay them there. So if they would get paid $100 a day, you pay them $100. If they would have a job of getting $100 a day and they're charging you $500 a day, I'll pay halachi and allowed, even though it is done, but not allowed. Okay, let's read the Gemara. Rava said to the son of Chibarav, let me tell you a nice thing to have in Amar Avuch that your father once said. Shmuel said, if somebody sells, let's say Reuven owes money to Shimon. So Shimon is a lender, Reuven is a borrower. Shimon then turns around and it's $100. Shimon turns around, he needs money quickly, and the due date not for another month. So he turns around and sells the contract to Levi, which happens all the time. That's what Wells Fargo used to do, used to buy all these mortgages. So they would turn around and sell it to Levi, but instead of it would be 90 cents to the dollar. They would sell it to him for $90, and then a month later, Levi can collect 100. Levi is not hard pressed for money. And that's a business. So if then Shimon turns around to Reuven the lender, says, Reuven, you know what, the $100 you owe me, I'm moichel you. It's a valid mechila. And not only that, even if Shimon dies, his heir can turn around to Reuven and say, Reuven, and Levi can no longer collect the money. It's an unbelievable halacha. And I'll explain to you tomorrow the basis for this halacha. But let's say if a woman gets married and she gives him part of the dowry, or she gives him part of the nixim, some loan contract that people owe her money, then she turns around and she is meichel that debt. It's not a valid mechila. Why not? We had two versions of the Gemara yesterday. If yodoi ki yodoi or yodoi odif mi yodoi, but definitely they're both equal partners, so she no longer can unilaterally be meichel. It's not just a third party, like Shimon sells it to Levi, a third party. Here they're not partners, and therefore she cannot unilaterally forego the loan without being involved. She sold the ksuva, but she needed some money desperately. The ksuva collect $200. She sold it for $30 because they're taking a big risk. If she passes away, she passes away before the husband. It's questionable whether she will, whether he will ever collect. So therefore, because very questionable to ever collect, because if she dies first, there's no ksuva. So they're taking a risk. So they're paying her very little money, but she needs the money desperately for whatever reason. So they sold the ksuva, and what happened was Igasha, she was divorced. Now she's entitled to ksuva, but then what happened was a shchiva, and she died. So because she died, her daughter, she had a lone daughter, Yashin. Also, Katava the Bartish came to the daughter, hey, your mother sold the ksuva, give us all the benefits of that ksuva we want it. Nachman was a relative figure, was saying aloud. Leka the Lizbalates, he was talking aloud to himself or to somebody sitting next to him, one of his students. Nobody's going to advise this young girl what to do, how she can get out of it. Tays, you know what she should do? He wasn't talking to the girl, he was just talking out loud. She should go, the tichla liksuvasa. She should go. Now, there are two ways of learning that her father was still alive. She's the only daughter. Her father was still alive. She would go to the father and convince the father to be meichel. And she says, I'm meichel the ksuva. You don't have to pay the ksuva. Because the Yiddish can also be meichel. And the moment you meichel ksuva, the people aboard it cannot collect anymore. We just said that v'chaza machle machul. The ima legabe avu meichel ksuva. Why would she do that? She gets then she loses all the money. No, she won't, because eventually her father will die, and then she's the sole heir. She'll collect it anyway. Plus, and later he will yashin it from her. That's the best advice he can give. Or others learn shot that the father died already. Better, the father died already. So now she represents a father, she represents a mother, so she can be meichel herself. She can say, I'm now the mother. I'm being meichel to my other self, which is the father. She's meichel, and then the lekeach cannot collect. Shama, she heard. She obviously heard Rav Nachman say this. Ozla achil, she did that, and she won. And then I'm not felt guilty. As we had the Gemara before. We're acting like lawyers, telling them how to behave. It's not really right. Why actually gave advice and then later he regretted. At first he thought, you have to take care of family. Blood is thicker than water, and therefore you can stretch the envelope a little bit and take care of your family. Although the same, then he regretted it because he says, not because it's wrong taking care of your family, nothing wrong giving them advice, but Adam Choshev Shainim, because Rav Nachman was the bezin, and people would look up Rav Nachman, they wouldn't understand that's because of relative. They'll think, you're allowed to behave this way, you're allowed to be a toin. That's the whole problem of why so many Rabbanim are against toinim today. When toinim advise you what to do and how to behave and how to circumvent the law and all that. But an Adam Choshev is different. He shouldn't behave this way because people will emulate him and say,